close your eyes and imagine with me for a moment. You've peeled the plastic off your bag of popcorn, set the timer to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. You dim the lights and get settled into the most comfortable spot on the couch. You've put in a long week of work and are going to enjoy the fruits of your labor by tuning in to the new sequel of one of your favorite movie franchises. Whether it's a period piece, an epic adventure, or a sci-fi saga, you're expecting a classic hero's journey with fun and interesting characters and interesting plots. But as the story unfolds, you notice something strange. The magic of the storytelling feels different, diluted even. Instead of timeless themes like courage, sacrifice, and redemption, the narrative is heavy with modern and progressive ideas like identity politics, class warfare, and the weight of new definitions of morality. Suddenly you realize that you're not watching an entertaining story, but rather a lecture, one scripted with the language of today's cultural agenda. Now don't misunderstand, as Christians we know God's word is filled with themes of justice, compassion, and love. But what's happening in the entertainment world today seems different. Instead of offering stories that dig into our shared human struggles, we're presented with tales calibrated to promote ideologies. Buzzwords like inclusion, equity, and representation have moved from background to center stage, reshaping the narratives we once knew and loved. And we can't help but wonder if these stories are no longer trying to entertain us, but to convert us. Today, we're wading into the deep end of wokism in entertainment, the dominance of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, in everything from blockbuster movies to iconic fantasy series. We're asking the hard questions. Why are so many beloved franchises bending the knee to these ideals? And why do these stories feel not only different, but hollow? What's happening to the tales we thought were timeless? We'll hold these shifting narratives up to the light of Scripture, exploring what God's story says about truth, identity, and purpose. Can we embrace these values without compromise, or is there a higher calling, a way to engage with art and culture that honors the ultimate storyteller? So, your 2.5 minutes are up, the popcorn's ready. We're going to investigate the DEI agenda and whether or not it can hold up to the weight of Scripture, and see whether these stories are worth telling or even worth hearing.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Reforming Nerdom podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jordan Cecile, and I am joined, as always, so far, by Nate Wright and Ben Emery. Boys, how are you doing?
Great, wonderful.
I'm a little envious. I see the Star Wars posters going up as Ben's bringing his life of nerdom into his little recording area. That's good.
So there's a reason for this, Nate. This is a reminder for you about Luke's blue lightsaber, just in case you forget.
Harsh. Look at me in my green sweater, like I walked right into it. It's funny. I was recording something the other day. I can't remember what I was recording, and somebody was showing like little figurines and stuff that they had in their area because we were having some tech difficulties. And so I was just like, I have Darth Vader beside me. And he's like, why do you have Darth Vader beside you? I'm like, it's a secret. You can't know yet.
Yeah. Ben, I just love that is such an epic troll. I just love it. Now it's just like permanently there to remind Nate of his ineptitude in answering that question.
Of his utter failure.
You know what? No, go ahead, Nate. What were you going to say?
Well, and I like that I just like naturally, oh, hey, I like your thing. Like I walked right into it. Like that was, I will get you back for this. I'm going to look for public humiliation of the highest order.
Well, it's funny that you mention or you bring up Star Wars because I don't know if you guys saw this, but apparently they're now working on a new Star Wars trilogy after the last one. And because Hollywood has no good ideas anymore, they are likely going to be picking up the Skywalker saga again, even though it was supposed to be.
I saw that this morning, but like literally, I didn't really read into it, but like the headline was something along the lines of like might pick up the Skywalker saga ... or might not.
Yeah.
That was
I'm just kind of expecting.
That was really helpful.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well,
Great
we're kind of
article.
expecting them to do that though, because again, like they can't really. I think actually, and this kind of leads into our conversation for today, but we'll get to that in a second. But like just the lack of originality, and they just can't help themselves to. It's like, well, we're just going to play off of nostalgia. We're going to go back to the things that we know that work because they just can't come up with a good idea anymore. And so, I mean, I'm expecting it. I don't. I really hope that they don't bring Hamill back, Mark Hamill, because he is just such an insufferable human being now. I don't know what he has done for them to control him the way that they do, but man, he is just brutal.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And yeah, they just need to move on. I mean, they just need to move on. It's they got the nostalgia points in by bringing back everybody in the Ray trilogy, but like everything else was so bad that nostalgia couldn't save it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like in the first one in that trilogy, nostalgia saved it a bit. It's like, oh my goodness, is that the Millennium Falcon? Like, oh my god,
Yeah.
oh, it's Han and Chewie. Like, but as it went on, it was just even
Yeah.
the
Except for
nostalgia
every
couldn't.
scene, it's like, oh, it's Han and Chewie, but it's a really lame Han and Chewie.
Well,
And
that's
you're like,
it, right?
oh, it's Luke. And you're like, oh, it's just the worst version of Luke Skywalker.
It's like just killing all your childhood heroes. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
I'm curious for you guys. What have you done in the last week? Like how have you nerded out in the last week since we recorded?
Well, so I think I mentioned it maybe in the first a couple episodes ago about like a Star Wars card game that I've been playing with the kids. And it's like it's in the same vein as, like Magic or whatever. And so they get you by releasing new sets like every 5 seconds. And so they they
So
released a
true.
new one just not that long ago. And so of course, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a a guy thing. I'm not sure, but that thrill of like ripping open a pack of cards
Oh,
to just, like
it
the
is a
thrill of the
thrill.
hunt
Yeah.
or just the like the need to collect and categorize and I don't know what it is, but nothing beats it. So anyway, we ripped open a few packs. It was great.
Nice.
Regret nothing.
Nate, what about you?
Um, so a couple things that this week so Judah and I started watching Clone Wars. So I've been kind of delaying it for a little while.
So funny enough, that's the like the new set that came out is it's like the Clone Wars era
Oh,
for the
sweet.
cards, which is sweet. Yeah, so the kids were pretty into that.
It's it wasn't like I didn't want we didn't have Disney for the longest time. So it's like we just weren't supporting Disney, and but we kind of rotate through, we'll do Netflix for a while, we'll do this for a while. We've tried a few different like Christian streaming services and stuff, but we do come back every once in a while. So anyway, we did get Disney again for a little while, and so I'm like, this is a great time to watch the Clone Wars with Judah. So we've been doing that, and he's really enjoying it. But another thing, not that this is necessarily nerding out, but we watched Prince Caspian not that long ago, right? So I was reading the Narnia books to the kids, and we had finished Prince Caspian in the summer. So we were looking for something for a movie night, and Prince Caspian, I was like, let's just watch Prince Caspian. I think I was telling you this, Ben, right? Because I was texting you during, and I'm just like, none of this happened. This is terrible.
I had pre-warned you.
Yeah. And like Caspian is so gay in the movie, and it's just not good. But the part that Judah was really upset about, so there's so much to be upset about, but when Miraz falls during the duel, they don't make a big moment like they do in the book where Peter lets him get up and shows chivalry and like respect to his enemy one-on-one. It doesn't have that, like, that's not a big moment. It kind of happens, but they draw no attention to it. And there's not that moment where Edmund is sort of like, oh, he shouldn't have done that, but I get why he did. Good for him. And so that was in the book. And Judah got really upset because he actually learned a great lesson through that, because when I was reading it to him, it sparked a conversation about, being honorable and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, we're chatting about it afterwards. And he's just like, I've tried to be honorable, Dad. And he's like, and then he goes, although some girls don't like the door being open for them. So like, this is like one of the application points I said, this is why I open the door for Mom. This is why you should. So he's like trying to be a little, chivalrous man. And he goes to open the door. I guess they were going into the market or something like that. And he tries to open the door for this lady. And he says, here you are, madam, or something, like just trying to be like kind of funny or whatever. And apparently the lady was like, I don't need a man to open the door for me. And Judah's like, oh, and then he just walks in and closes the door, and it's just like,
yes, you do.
Yeah. So it was just, it's funny because this thing in Caspian that was actually a really good teaching moment wasn't in the movie, and he had noticed it and he was disappointed about it. But it's interesting because Judah and I then had this conversation about this lady who didn't want him having the door have the door open for her, and it was just really interesting, even with my girls, kind of going like, why wouldn't girls want guys who love them enough to protect them and do things for them and serve them? And I was just like, it's just the logic of a child, right? And yet we live in a culture where we don't want high King Peters. We want sniveling little effeminate men, not high King Peters.
So you're saying that nasty women are like King Mraz?
Yes,
that's the equivalent here.
Yeah, that's the takeaway. I appreciate you drawing out the application for us.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I mean, like that's where, and it's too bad when so many young boys now are watching this, the little cartoons of trans kids and or ponies that are non-binary and all that stuff, and it's like Judah and like Haddon and Ben, your boys, like they're actually going to be weird because they actually are going to try to be men. And like, that's why like we even see how like why all this stuff is being weaponized really against.
I mean,
kids
they won't be weird in our church community, but like in broader society, they sure will be.
It's like, wow, you eat meat and you lift weights and you like women and treat them with respect, you monster, right? Yeah. Like it's just crazy how that's where we are. But totally. Anyway, so before we get into today's topic of discussion, which we've kind of touched on a little bit, just a little bit of housekeeping for us, and just remind everybody, we are Reforming Nerdom. We get together each week to talk about all things nerd culture from an unapologetically Christian worldview. You can watch all of our episodes on YouTube and podcast services around the world. And if you really love what we do, you can become a Patreon subscriber, where there you'll be able to get a lot of really cool stuff, ad-free episodes, exclusive shows, and some other really neat things. So go check us out over there. So what we're wanting to talk about today is wokism in media, and why it even matters. Like, and so it's just fascinating how this kind of comes up right now in light of the U.S. election, which I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't celebrate what happened in America.
I feel like it might come up in this conversation also.
Yeah, well, and it honestly, like, it felt kind of like at the end of Return of the Jedi when the Empire fell, and there's like everyone in every planet around the universe is celebrating. It's like that's kind of what it felt like when
Ewoks are just drumming on stormtrooper helmets.
That's right. I woke up. What would that have been? Wednesday morning, and was just. I remember the last time feeling good going to bed in 2020. It's like, oh man, he's got this. And then in the morning, wake up and it's like, wow, magical extra 100, right? Just like, what is 150,000 votes? It's like, that's incredible. And so I was feeling like the same thing was going to happen. And then it was like 6 o'clock and I look and I went to the CNN because, I mean, if they were going to call it, it's done. And they did. Yeah. And I was just like immediately wide awake, couldn't believe it. This actually happened. Like God actually relented his judgment really against the West, because that's really, it wasn't just America. Like he relented and was very kind to us in that. But what was really fascinating leading up to and how media is related to the election was how all of these celebrities were just ushered forward, whether because they actually believe in Kamala and the Democratic Party or because they're being blackmailed for certain things that they've probably done.
Because
But
the
it's like,
Diddy list and
yeah, like they, I mean, yeah, like I think most, if you got up in front of the world promoting and saying Kamala Harris was a competent human being to run for the highest office in the world, you probably are on a list or we're at a certain party and they've got something on you. I'm
You
like,
probably you probably received an unmarked envelope at some point.
yeah, yeah. And but even in that, it's like, to me, I can't help but think, like, how are there actually people in the world who see J-Lo go up on stage and start crying and say, you need to trust me on my judgment in people, where it's like, you literally dated Diddy, who's a right, and she's like, you need to trust me. But like, it's incredible that they would even think that would work
Yeah.
in convincing people to change
Yeah.
their mind. So like, I guess, do you guys even think, like, do you think there are really people? There have to be, but I can't think of a person who would be persuaded just simply by seeing J Lo or I don't know. I can't even think of who else would have been up there. Like,
I mean, there obviously are, but I think they drastically overestimated the amount of influence they still have. Like, I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago, like just like the Hollywood zeitgeist was sort of very influential, where now there's, sure, there's still some people, but I don't think even like left liberal people care a ton about what J-Lo has to say.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think you're right. It used to be like the view of Hollywood back in like the '60s through '80s was like they're the best of us, right? And that's where the
Yeah.
fascination came from. And then, of course, the longer Hollywood was there, the more people worshiped them, the greater their falls were, and we became obsessed with their falls, right? And so all the tabloid magazines about all the messiness of their lives getting exposed, drug habits, affairs, all that kind of stuff. But I really do think that the icing on the cake was COVID, because you have all these celebrities like in their yachts, right? Saying like, stay home, stay safe while they have like buddies water skiing like behind their boats. Like it was, I remember a Babylon Bee post actually during COVID where it was like, um, it was like moving and powerful. Several celebrities line up their yachts to spell out "stay safe" from the sky or something that shows all these boats aligned. And it's like, we're in this together kind of stuff. So I think COVID was part of it. And then honestly, like, and this is the power of media, I think Ricky Gervais literally eviscerated anything, because who watches that stuff? Like you and I, like we all watch the clips of that the day after because we care nothing about Hollywood parties like that. But when he got up, so for all the people who are still interested, I think he honestly just eviscerated Hollywood, like, and people already were moving in that direction. So no, I don't think that helped at all. In fact, I think it hurt, because there's a subversion now, I think, where there's a lot of people are immediately skeptical of elites telling them what to do. So I actually think it worked against.
And I think there's a lot, like, similarly to what has happened, and you see the result of it in the election, I think in a lot of ways with the media, and the uptick of new media like podcasts, YouTube, free media, versus, and just so many more people consuming that versus our legacy media. It's so, like you said, the 50s, the 60s, the like the media propped up Hollywood, like you say. These are the best and the brightest, these are the most handsome, these are the, like a lot of them were like literal wartime heroes and things like that. Where now, uh the legacy media still tries to do that to Hollywood, still tries to prop them up, but then we have the media that people actually consume, which
Right.
is just like eviscerating Hollywood stars and showing all their faults and TMZ,
Who
their
showed
the
up on
arrests and
Epstein's list? Who showed up on
yeah,
Diddy's
yeah. So
list?
I mean, I just think there's no influence left among these people.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think, moving forward? So we've seen over the last I don't know. It feels like since COVID, where as I know Elon Musk often says it, like the woke mind virus is what he calls it, and how it really feels like COVID was the thing that really ramped that up, where the whole double speak and the gaslighting and all the crazy stuff of making us feel like we were crazy for thinking that, you know, a pedophile is a bad thing. It's like, wait, why would you ever think that? Whoever has thought that in history? It's like, wait, what? And like, there's just like this subverting reality. And so as we even think about like wokeism as kind of as the title of the show is, you know, go woke, go broke. You know, we're seeing this. Maybe I don't know if it's a correction, but do you guys think that we're seeing a correction, a course correction in this? Is it just slowing down? Because I think I heard, oh, who was it? It was in one of the interviews after the election where somebody was saying like what we need. Maybe it was Vance, the new VP, where it was, he was saying like we need to almost work now, or we're shifting the Overton window back, where like the left did such a, I mean, a good job of shifting it to the point of literal insanity, and now he's like, we need to shift it back. But like, are we? I mean, Trump's going to be president, Lord willing. I mean, unless they try to kill him again, you know, who knows? But do you guys think that we're going to see a course correction here? Is it just a pause? Are we just, or do you actually see? Obviously, God is sovereign. God could be bringing change, but like, do you think that we're in a place right now culturally where we're going to see wokeism retreat, or is it just on a? Are they just kind of hunkering down?
I mean, we'll see, but like, I the irony of them likely having stolen the 2020 election. If they hadn't done that, I don't actually think Trump would have gone scorched earth like it looks like he's doing now. Like, I just watched a clip of him last night, just like, I'm going to arrest everyone in the FBI and the CIA. I'm going to like move 100,000 people with federal jobs out of Washington. And, you know, like, just like, I don't think that would have been 2020 Trump. But it's 2024 Trump. And so I do think they've sort of created this monster. And yeah, I do think there is going to be a shift. I mean, we'll see. We'll see if anything gets followed through on, if it's just talk and whatever. But I don't know how much of a shift back the other way it'll be, but I do think they'll try.
I think the opportunity, I guess, that's before us is that the woke mob overplayed its hand, I think, and they went for too much too fast. So you have people who, okay, at first it's sort of like BLM, you have to acknowledge and make your social media avatar black for the day, and you have to do these things, and there's this sort of there's this you know, these small tokens, these small pinches of incense that they're asking you to give. And then it became like, you know, you have to put your pronouns in your email and all these little things. And then they started, you know, destroying, you know, beloved childhood institutions and media, right? Like I do think that there's two things that can be idols. This is part of, I guess, the purpose of the show. Two things that can be idols are entertainment and sports. And both of those things are getting absolutely ruined by wokeism. Comedy is getting ruined by wokeism, right? And so you have like, you have guys like Steve Carell who, you know, was asked to go back to the office. Would you go back? And he's like, no, we couldn't do any of that anymore, right? And who was it? You were just telling me this, Ben, the other day, that there was a really good episode of Cars and Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. It was Seinfeld and somebody else, right? And they were having some conversation about how comedy's kind of dead, and you can't say anything anymore, right? So there's comedy. You have like sci-fi nerds who are watching, you know, Star Wars get eviscerated by wokeism. You have fantasy nerds who are watching Lord of the Rings get torn apart by Rings of Power and all this stuff. You have sports fanatics who are watching, men take like beating the snot out of women in a boxing ring. Like, so all the things that we love, which either we love with the right kind of love or their idols, those things are all getting destroyed. It's infiltrating our workplace. Our kids are coming home from school with no skills in math or language. But they can tell you what non-binary means, and who the people are who are responsible for Gay Pride Month and all this kind of stuff. So I think it just infiltrated too much of people's lives, and I think your average person is just sick of it. So when you get somebody who stands up and says something against it, like you look at some of the movies that media that has been super successful, like Maverick, we all talked about it when it came out, how great that movie was because it didn't have a lick of this stuff in it. And so you have all this, you have, I just think your average person is sick of it. And I think, Kamala Harris, just to bring this back to the conversation about the election, wokeism is what gives birth to DEI. And DEI, it's interesting, like she is a DEI candidate, right? Like she's the epitome of
the
a DEI
ultimate
candidate.
DEI hire. Yeah.
Like the biggest DEI hire ever. And it's so funny when you say that to somebody who's bought into all this stuff, because they're like, no, she's not. I'm like, so you're saying it's a bad thing? Like, why are you offended by this? Either it's a good, right? But and so she kind of represented like, what is the future that you want? Is this what we want? Incompetent people, but they check the boxes of racial minority and gender, or do you want this guy who's efficiently going to get things done? And I think that the fact that he won popular vote, he won the presidency, he won the Senate, he won the House is proof is in the pudding that people are sick of this.
Yeah, and I think like the way that Trump, it seems like from the exit polls, like kind of crushed the independent vote. Right, lefties are going to be lefties, but the independents went drastically with Trump, and like I agree with what you said in terms of just them going too hard, too fast, overplayed their hand. Where like we would say as post-mill Christians, sort of, right, like we're not. It's a bottom-up movement. It can only be a bottom-up movement. You can't actually impose from the top down, right? Eventually the people are just not gonna take it.
Yeah.
And I think they overstepped, right? I think I saw the other day that it was like this survey that like it was like 12% of people actually agreed with and wanted to use pronouns in emails.
Right.
And yet this was like, this is the new standard. Everybody is just like, but nobody wants it.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just like a small example, but like, there's just like thing after thing after thing. And eventually even the left leaning types are just like, this is too far, too much.
But to kind of talk about the power, like, and why we're doing Reforming Nerdom, like to talk about the power of media, it's interesting because you're absolutely right. So 12% of people think this is a legitimate thing, and yet every corporation has implemented it, and people have bowed to it. And I even know Christians that I've advised, like, you just don't do that. Don't give in there. And good, well-meaning Christians who just, they got to put food on the table for their kids and they decide to do it. I don't think they should, but they do. And yet that's not where this thing broke. It really did break, honestly, entertainment and sports. And I think it's interesting because it's not like there was such a backlash to we were talking about Star Wars earlier. It's not like there was such a backlash to the Star Wars trilogy that everybody's like, yeah, you're right. Like all the writers come up and say, yeah, you're right. Rey was just a DEI hero, right? Like we got that wrong. Let's work it back. Nobody's saying that. But they're going to start changing their tune or they will go broke. And so what you actually see is you're seeing the almighty dollar is actually the thing that means the most to producers and to directors. And so you're going to see a response. And I think you're already starting to see that as they recognize they're not going to acknowledge what they did wrong, but they know that they overplayed their hand here. And I think that's actually what's going to shift the window back.
Yeah, because every institution has a guiding principle,
right?
Like we would obviously argue that should be Christ, but for them it's mammon, it's money, right? And so they thought this was the way, right? It's not like they were doing this because I really don't think at least the majority of these people actually ideologically give a crap about any of this. They just thought it was the way that we were going to take the most power, make the most money. And so they'll pivot, they'll find the next thing that they'll push, and
And it does show just the power of nerds, if you will. It is that you get to choose what you support, and you can choose to give your money to what is good and true and beautiful, even if they're not overtly Christian things. When a story like Maverick, when a story catches your heart, go and throw your money at it, support it, show how much you enjoyed it. And when something sucks because they put lesbian space witches impregnating one another by the force, then don't support it and speak out against it.
I can't believe that sentence is a real thing.
You'd think I was being facetious. You'd think yeah, but I'm not.
Yeah, well, because I agree with you guys that, I mean, at the end of the day, so much of this is motivated by money and just wanting. But the weird thing in all of this, where even like during COVID, some of those things, I was trying to like make sense of everything, and a lot of it just didn't really add up. And so, but you do see some of these decisions. So like you see Disney, right? They made how many billions of dollars over in the first phase of Marvel, right? You had all these movies, like it just kind of building to the point where I think Endgame ended up, I mean, for a while there, it was the highest grossing movie ever.
It was nuts. Yeah.
Over $2 billion. And then they had to re-release Avatar to make it go up, which I think that's cheating, but whatever.
100% is cheating.
But then right. And then you see this bad movie after bad movie after bad show. And like I think for a while they were being propped up by people who just really loved it. Like I know a guy in our church, friend of ours, Sean, right? He just loves everything Marvel, and he is willing to give the benefit of the doubt in a way that there's just I am not able to.
Yeah.
I even gave them a few productions post Endgame.
Yeah.
Benefit of the doubt based on previous track record or whatever. But yeah,
and then so they've been progressive, like increasingly losing money, like to the point not even just like not making as much money, they're actually losing money. I think it was the Marvels, the one that just came out with girl boss Brie Larson, like insufferable human being, just won't, and she's dreadful to listen to. But like they lost like $230 million on that movie, like factoring in marketing budget, production costs, all that stuff. And then you have just the absolute decimation of any of like She-Hulk. What are some of the other like Marvel shows? I just haven't haven't even
like Captain Marvel. You have all those.
Captain Marvel. Like it's just terrible. But
the Shuri stuff with Black Panther afterwards, and then the whole Wakanda like fiasco. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where I'm wondering where those things, like they keep making the decisions, like they keep making bad stuff.
Yeah.
Like and like Disney's stock price, I was just looking at it the other day, and in the last, I think it was in 2021 to now, like they've lost 50% or roughly 50% off their stock price, because a lot of people are not giving the money anymore, obviously, because they don't want to support them. But yet they keep making She-Hulk, and they keep making Agatha All Along. Now, granted, I haven't actually heard a ton about Agatha All Along. Maybe it's not actually that bad. I'm doubtful and leery of that. But so it's just, I wonder, like it seems like some people are willing to are showing that they're motivated by the dollar. Paramount, Maverick, like they obviously, and they cashed out huge, and you're starting to see some of that change there. But it does make you wonder, like why a company like Disney, who is the largest movie company, TV, broadcasting, content company in the world, like it seems like this is an ideological thing to them, and they're willing to lose.
I agree,
money.
but I think it's more like right. If there's anything that motivates people more than money, it's not wanting to admit you were wrong.
Mm.
And I think they probably pushed it the hardest and the furthest. And so for them to 180, I think it's just too hard of a pill to swallow for them. I think it'll come though. I really do.
Yeah. I think it will as well. The other thing is that they overtly said, and Disney did it like as well, like that this is what they were trying to do. Right. So to walk it back would need a similarly strong statement. But I think that, where it was all heading, I think that you're going to, I think that you're going to see it just not get there. Kind of the brakes will get pumped and it'll start coming back, because I do think that, I mean, even think of the new Ninja Turtles movie, right? We're talking about wokism and DEI stuff, like the new Ninja Turtles. So Judah watches the old school 90s cartoon Ninja Turtles and loves it. And again, like, not trying to be crass or crude or anything like that, but like April O'Neil is like a tall, beautiful, busty woman who's like, all the Ninja Turtles have a crush on her and all this kind of stuff. You watch the new one that came out with Nickelodeon, and she's a fat, probably lesbian black girl who is not attractive at all and is just like, looks
One of the
like the
guys.
typical non-binary woke mobist, right? And it's just and so I say that only to point out the fact that Judah, who's like, he's 7 years old, he's not like a misogynist, like white supremacist, whatever, and yet he's like, I don't like April in the new one. I'm like, yeah, I know. He's like, I kind of had a crush on her. It's just like the old one, not the new one, right? Like, and that's it. Like, there's just they ruin these characters for the sake of it. And I imagine that you're going to get a whole era of Ninja Turtles. You could have recaptured an entire new era of Ninja Turtles fans, because most parents aren't showing their kids the 90s cartoon Ninja Turtles to make their 7-year-old modern day love the Ninja Turtles. I am. But like that movie, that Nickelodeon one with Seth Rogen or whatever, that's not going to capture a new generation of Ninja Turtle fans.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, can we talk for 30 seconds about just how like golden age the 90s were for awesome superhero, like the Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Batman, the Ninja Turtles? Like, what an era of just great.
No wonder it produced such great guys like us,
honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like, we're not gonna, at least right now, it feels like, and maybe I'm just such a pessimist. Like and it's just like discouraging, because I want like the end game experience again. I don't know if you guys like,
but see, but ironic, like I say that, and see, and I don't think they understand that end game doesn't happen if 90s superhero cartoons didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because we're the guys that watched Endgame.
Yeah.
And we watched Endgame and dragged our wives along and our, because we grew up in an era of awesome superheroes. And then we got to see them in real life, like that's, and so now they're not attracting young kids to superhero stuff because they're making lame superheroes.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if it's like what I just feel like I've been robbed of something, because that whole experience with the end game, the building up to it, like that was actually such an incredible experience with friends to enjoy that. Like I had a group of guys who we went to all the movies and there was the near the end where there was the last maybe 3 or 4 movies up until Infinity War and then Endgame, where it was just like the in between speculation, and like there was like an entire industry on YouTube that was thinking about, what's the next one? What's the spoiler going to be? What does the post credit scene mean? And it was incredible. It was that like cultural moment. And I was just talking with a friend who lives in Tennessee, and he's moved down there, and he was just talking about how football is just such a cultural a shared cultural thing that kind of unites and binds everybody in the community together. Everybody's watching it Saturday. Everybody's, wearing down there, the volunteer shirt. And it was kind of the same thing here, right? Where you could kind of you could be at the dentist and talk to somebody about Marvel, and like that was real. That was an actual thing. and it feels like they took something from us that was awesome, that was just like something that we could all share and nerd out with. And that's why it's just like, it's so disappointing where you just see these, movie after movie, and it's like, I can't watch it. I can't watch She-Hulk. I mean,
yeah, and it's funny. So, and I've heard people try and blame, like, oh, it's because they used up all the good characters in that like phase of Marvel, and it's just like, but honestly, who gave a crap about Iron Man before Iron Man came out?
yeah,
Like
For
Iron
real.
Man was like the lamest Marvel comic there was. Nobody
Agreed.
cared
Yeah.
about Iron Man.
Yeah.
And so it's not the characters. They've just executed so poorly.
Yeah. Well, and even when you, like, as we're talking about the DEI stuff, I had no issues with the female characters that were in the original movies. Like Black Widow, she was dope. I liked her. I thought she was a good character. It's just like, then when
I
they
mean, it was
start,
lame that like Hawkeye didn't get to sacrifice himself instead of her. Like some of that stuff was kind of lame, but
Yeah.
the characters themselves weren't like overt girl boss in your face. Like they were not bad.
And
They
that's
weren't
where,
insufferable.
yeah, and that's where when you have Captain Marvel, who is just like, they're trying to make her out to be they're like the most powerful of all of them. She could beat up Thor. She could, like, she's the guy, or, well, she wants to be the guy. But
The she
and
guy.
it's, yeah, the she guy, and even in like She-Hulk, oh, she's more powerful than Hulk now, and it's like, that's just ridiculous. But it shows even how, like, there is that ideology that they're trying to push through all of this, and like, you see feminism, you see the LGBT stuff, and like the normalizing of things, and I really see this in video games in particular. And it was something I started noticing, probably, I think the first time I noticed like really feminism creeping its way into and like subverting reality was the Hunger Games, in the movie, where all of a sudden it's like, okay, it's one thing to have a female lead character. That's fine. Like, that doesn't bother me, that she, is good with a bow and arrow and she's crafty and clever. Like, that didn't bother me. It's just then when all these like military leaders are women, and the generals are women, and the commanders are women. And then that's where I remember talking to my wife, and maybe I was just onto it a little earlier, but it was like, doesn't that just feel off? And at the time, I didn't really have the theological mind to really understand or think about it. But even now, seeing, it's like, oh, like, this has been a gradual thing that started maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, however long ago it was that those movies started coming out. But that's where it's like, it's the clever, and I think, Nate, you have mentioned it before, where it's just like the not mentioning it to make it seem like it's a normal thing, and why we actually need to be very discerning as Christians in that, because I mean, there are many Christians who would just watch that, not think about it, and then that's just like a normal thing. So then when they look out in the world and they see these girls lining up at recruitment offices, and that's just like a normal thing, because, oh, well, I mean, of course it is, right? I just watched this commander in this movie that I watched. So it's, we even just see, though, the how and why media is such a target for the woke mind virus, because it actually does bleed into life and everything, right?
Yeah, totally. It's interesting that I think what ends up happening a lot with movie writers and people who are decision makers here is you have more and more of them, because of DEI, quite frankly, you have more and more of them are women as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, yeah, we can have that conversation at another time. But so you have more and more people who are sitting around the writing table who are females, and generally females who are in those higher, more elite roles are generally women without kids. And so you have now these women without kids who have bought into feminism, who are like, what we really need is we need a Captain Marvel who's a female who can beat them all up, all the boys up, so that it just shows young girls how powerful they can be. And they don't have kids at home. They don't have girls at home.
Yeah. Have you
who
ever met a young girl?
well, that's it. Like, we could watch something superhero related as a family, and the next day when the kids are playing, Judah's the powerful superhero, and Quinn and Harper are like mom and daughter who are playing house still, and Superman still needs to come back and eat, right? So they're making the food, and like I know that sounds like girl, go make a sandwich or whatever. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm saying, like, naturally speaking, Quinn has no desire to be a girl who can beat all the guys up. That's just not innately in her. So you have these women who have been elevated because of DEI into these roles, and they're writing scripts for young women, and it's not what young women want. And so young women aren't flocking to the movies, and the guys who were flocking to these superhero movies are like, yeah, that's kind of lame. She-Hulk can't beat up Hulk. That's gay. And that's what you have, and that's how you end up $230 million in the hole with these movies.
Yeah, and I think we had, like you brought up, what's it called? Hunger Games. Like, we had a good decade or more where the only stories that were being consumed, at least in the written form, were these like YA fiction novels that were written by 30-something-year-old women.
Yeah.
Right. You had Twilight, you had Hunger Games, like all this stuff. I don't know. There's plenty more that I don't remember or care about. Whatever. Divergent. Yeah. And all the main characters were girl bosses. Like so like there's so many layers to this, but it's just like so kids can't read. So we have to then create, easy readable story. Like, they can't read just actual fiction. We have to create a category called young adult fiction. And then all the young adult fiction is written by feminist women. And there's no stories for young boys to read. It's just like, yeah, there's a lot of layers to this, but it's all downstream from a lot of things.
Well, and I hate how when it's being like crammed down our throats, right? We don't really have a choice as to whether we're gonna be given the option. And it's like, so even when you see Ariel become a black girl, like, that is the epitome, maybe at least in like media, like the worst DEI thing ever. I mean, that girl, the actress, could she sing? Absolutely. Like, she's an incredible singer. I'm sure she's a good actress. I don't know her that well. But for that role, it's like, what were you thinking? Like, obviously you're trying to push something. And then you even see another, what was it, in Captain America and the Winter Soldier, where all of a sudden, like, spoilers, Captain America was, the white guy who was chosen in instead of the real Captain America, who's this old black guy who was beaten and bruised by these, like, it's just like, it makes you then almost like not even care about seeing, like, it diminishes actors and actresses who are people of color and people like women, where it's like, well, I don't want to feel that, oh, this has a woman in it now, I'm not even going to watch it because it's just going to be this feminist hit piece on why white Christian men are just awful baddies, when it actually takes away from good stories where women are the characters, or authors who are good authors. Like, I mean, Harry Potter is one of my, if not my favorite book series of all time, just because I grew up with it and with the release of it. And J.K. Rowling is a woman. I have zero issues whatsoever of J.K. Rowling being a woman, and there's another series that a friend of ours likes.
And part of that is even like, you have early on, you have like Hermione is more powerful because she's more studious and all this kind of thing than Harry is, and
that's female characteristics.
Right. But it's not written in a way where she's more powerful because she's a girl. She's more powerful because she's more studious. She's more disciplined. Harry isn't as self-disciplined as he needs to be, and that becomes part of the whole story arc. And it's like, that's just true to life. You're writing true stories. You're writing good stories. You have the maternal instincts of Harry's mom that play this huge role in the story. Like, there's just it's such a different thing.
You can see in like that Rowling would have those instincts in just the way that the woke mob has recently
attacked her over
Yeah.
her trans stance, right? Like she obviously had, like, I don't know, like she grew up at least like nominally Christian or whatever. So she had that in there and, had good writing, good character instincts because of that.
Yeah. And she was
Well, 'cause she's
influenced by good literature in the past, right? That's the whole thing. Like what wokeism seeks to do is tear down the past and build a new future. Whereas you have like what good storytelling is actually like built upon, like when you even think about Superman, right? I think I said this in a episode that we've already done, but it's the Jewish messianic hope that was actually woven into the writing of the character of Superman. And so you're building upon this messianic hope that's existed within a people for a long time. Like all good characters, all good story writing are learning from the stories of the past, right? You have like when in Dante, you have Virgil as the guide because the Aeneid and Virgil's writing was so instrumental to Dante. Like it all builds, and so if you try to tear it all down and start something new, you're actually throwing out years and decades and centuries of wisdom in terms of what kind of stories are compelling.
This episode of the Reforming Nerdom podcast is brought to you by the Ezra Institute. Founded in 2009 by Dr. Joe Boot, the Ezra Institute is dedicated to equipping Christians to think and live biblically in every area of life. Through in-person training programs, resources, and events, they help believers apply a Christian worldview to culture, education, politics, and more. With a growing presence in Canada, the US, and the UK, the Ezra Institute is committed to empowering the church to stand firm in today's secular world. Go to ezrainstitute.com to learn more. Now, back to the show.
Well, and it's like mentioning Rowling, and it's when it's grounded in reality. Obviously, like Harry Potter's not; it's fiction, right? But it's not trying to subvert like reality in that. For her, she would say, and like this is what got the left just losing their minds with her, was she didn't even say she's opposed to somebody changing their, like, mutilating themselves. Like she doesn't even have an issue. If you want to be like try to have the appearance of a man, you should be able to do that, is what she would say. She would just say that doesn't make you a man. It doesn't make you a woman to cut off your genitals. Like you're not one. But
If you want to be delusional,
that's right. And
it.
exactly. Yeah. And so she has no issues. I mean, for us as Christians, like that saddens us because, that person is an image bearer who is rejecting their creator. And that's sad. That's something that we need to, be, weep with those who weep and be saddened by that. But for the left, it's like, that's not enough. Like, it's not enough. Like they actually want you to
celebrate.
To celebrate and to actually like try and live in this fictional world that doesn't actually exist. Like just because you cut off your genitals doesn't make you a woman. And so, and that's even like where so much of like the left stuff, it's like it's subverting reality. It's just not real. And then so you have somebody like J.K. Rowling who comes up and says that, and it's like that's still not enough. So I think it just shows though that like we need this is a thing that needs radical like reformation. Like it needs Christians, us, to actually, and we've talked about this in the first couple episodes, but we need to not just be content in this thing was like a good example actually in the Harry Potter game that came out, I think it was last year. There's a trans character in there and they don't mention it. It's not like a celebrating it. It's just there's just this barkeeper who is a transgender. And a lot of people would just be like, oh, well, like that's not a big deal. They're not cramming it down my throat. But I think what we need to be doing, and actually this maybe leads into like the next thing that I'd like your guys' thoughts on, is like what does it actually look like for us to reform this? Obviously we need to be doing the work of the church and evangelizing, sharing the gospel, making disciples, Lord willing, those people at those studios become Christians. But like what do we do with these things? So like we have Paw Patrol, who, or maybe it wasn't Paw Patrol, Peppa Pig, I think you had mentioned, Nate, where all of a sudden it's just like two mommies. And so it's like, okay, we don't have our kids watch that. But I mean, I think we would have slightly different standards I'm sure for us what we watch versus what we allow our kids to watch, in terms of like, I can watch a gay character, but is it okay for us to watch that? Like, is it like, are we supporting it by just letting it pass and like, oh, okay, I can ignore it, whatever. And so, or should we actually be more upset about that stuff than we are?
Yeah, I mean, I think Christians, like, first of all, we think the only tool in our toolbox is boycott, and I think we have to remember that that's a very short term solution, but it does work, right? Like, I do think that there's something to be said for not giving them your money, and so I do think that I do think that it just starts with drawing lines in the sand, and figuring out what you will and won't allow and what you will and won't support. But it can't only be that. I think the other thing is we have to be, we have to be, I guess, educated and not lazy consumers. Meaning that when we do find something like, I think about the Wing Feather Saga, for example, that you turned our kids onto, that's now been like, great books, great show. It's on Pure Flix, season 1. And it's like, okay, well, as I said earlier, we still do kind of travel around Netflix here and do that for a couple months and then here, but we do now do Pure Flix as well, and there's not a whole lot of good stuff on there, quite frankly. But I want them to know, and so I've sent an email talking about how wonderful season 1 of Wing Feather Saga was, and you start lending them your money, you tell them what they're doing that's actually really good. I think it's not just boycotting. That is a tool in our tool belt, and we should use it appropriately. But then it's also figuring out who and where and what Christians are actually making better content. They're actually making content that's good and true and beautiful, and supporting them with your money and by helping them advertise. I think that's certainly one way that we can, where we go from here.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's kind of two, like, so yeah, I think those are some like shorter term solutions, and like supporting good content, good media and stuff is a little longer term. But I mean, ultimately I think step one is we have to start actually educating our kids with a Christian education that teaches kids what is good, true, and beautiful. So they love the right things. So they love good stories. They read good stories. Like the fact that, like I say, 10 or 15 years ago, 20, whatever it was, that Twilight and all this stuff was so popular was such a damning sort of like assessment. I'm just like, wow, like this is how we've educated our kids. Education has led them to love this.
Yeah.
So I think step one is educate our kids to love what's true, good, and beautiful. And then step two is actually start creating good content. Like we need to start making the stuff, not just relying on like, fingers crossed. Hopefully Disney will make something good. Like maybe they will, but only because they think that's what's going to get them the most amount of money, not because they believe in it. Right.
Right.
We need people creating the content that actually believe in it.
Yeah.
And
well,
I was just going to say really quickly, and then I'll throw it over to you, Jordan, is I think one of the things that too many Christians think is that what that means is Christians need to start creating stories about Bible man. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's this idea that anything Christian has to be overtly Christian. And I think, when you go back to great stories in the past, right? Whether it's like Peter Rabbit, great example. Some of the old comic books that we've talked about, like the Amazing Spider-Man, right? The Adventures of Superman, old Batman comic books and stuff like that. There was good content there, and it was good, and it was compelling, right? There's a reason Lord of the Rings has lasted and gone through the test of time. And so I think what we need is we just need people to, first of all, listen to our show and recognize that like nerddom is worth reforming, right? That this is actually something that's worth saving. And so we need Christians who are coming out and saying like, yeah, we could make a better movie about, Hulk than Hollywood did, but like, let's actually start creating new content that's great. Like, let's actually make superheroes, and they don't have to be Bible Man, right? There's something actually inherently valuable about having heroes that can be looked up to, both for young girls and for young boys. Like, let's do this. And how many churches would you get a great donation if you had, a young aspiring movie maker come in and talk about wanting to make this plethora of superhero movies that weave together in such a way that they'll culminate in this great, end movie. And but it's all going to glorify God because it's done in a universe that assumes true things about the world that God made and all this kind of stuff. And how big would that donation be compared to the guy who's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to build orphanages in a third world country? And I'm not saying that one thing is better than the other, but I'm saying, well, that's exactly what I'm saying. One thing is not better than the other. They are both God's work. And yet we all know which side is going to get the big love donation from a church, because we just don't see legitimacy in these kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, I think at least for the three of us, it'll happen, right? We're confident that we're going to see this change. We're going to see good Star Wars eventually. It's just a matter of time, right? And it just, yeah, I guess even for as I like think about that Christian media stuff, or not even non-woke media, and because you see like the Daily Wire, you see they're starting to like the kids content, which is good. Like, I will support that because it's better than the alternatives, but it's still not actually going to be that good, really, because it is still rooted largely in Christless conservatism in the US. Like, yes, it's not going to be talking about pronouns and gender ideology and all that stuff. So I'll take it, but it's not going to be ultimately, I don't think, or maybe it will, but I'm doubtful if the Daily Wire is going to be our bastion of hope for, kids entertainment moving forward. Because even when they did a movie, that one, it was like a school shooting. I don't know if you guys ever watched that one. I watched it, and it I would say it was inappropriate to, like, it was still pretty it wasn't much different than what you would see language wise, content wise. Like, it was I was a little bit surprised by it, but so yeah, I guess now, like, our prayer is that if any of our listeners, if you're an artist, if you're a music producer, a movie producer, if you're any of those things, like, get to work, right? Go start a business. Like, we look at Canon, Canon Plus, Canon Press, like, they're doing good work. They're coming out with great stories. They're coming out with great documentaries. So it can happen. It will happen. And yeah, I think we just need to pray that we can see wokism finally die, because I think it needs to. It's that one of those serpents, as Nate, you often say from the pulpit, it's like one of those serpents or the dragons that need to be slain. And it's probably going to be our kids who do it, or maybe our great grandkids, but I think we can confidently say it will. But anyways, boys, is there anything else? Are we good to wrap up?
Yeah, I think the reality is this topic is going to keep coming up, because as we analyze nerd culture, this is all over it. And so it will keep coming up. But this is maybe a good kind of introductory episode to how it's infiltrated so pervasively and begun to ruin so many good things. So as we analyze nerd culture, we'll point out where it's ruined things. But hopefully more and more as this continues to go on, we'll be able to point out where maybe there's some pushback, and maybe the recent good news in a variety of ways is going to help with that. And hopefully we can do a little bit of helping with that as well.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Reforming Nerdom. We hope you enjoyed. And just a reminder, you can subscribe on podcast services around the world, or give the like button a click on YouTube. And if you'd like to join us on Patreon, we'd love to have you there. Join our Discord channel, where we're going to be having a lot of nerdy conversations and lots of fun there. So thank you again, listeners, for joining us. And until next time, stay nerdy.